In 1621, Dutch East India Company warships descended on a handful of islands smaller than Manhattan. Within weeks, a population of 15,000 was crushed to barely 1,000. The man who ordered it, Pieterszoon Coen, was never condemned. Instead, the Dutch cast him in bronze and called him a national hero. All of it. Every last death, over a spice you probably have in your kitchen right now. Nutmeg was never just a kitchen spice. In the early 1600s, it was the rarest commodity on Earth. The Banda Islands, tiny, volcanic, and almost invisible on European maps, were the only place where the tree Myristica fragrans grew wild. The world's entire supply of nutmeg and its sister spice mace passed through these islands. Every merchant, from Lisbon to London, knew that a single sack could buy a house. In Amsterdam, the price per pound soared from 2 guilders in 1595 to 12 guilders by 1625. A six-fold jump in a single generation. During plague outbreaks, panic buyers drove prices even higher. Medical pamphlets promised that nutmeg could ward off the Black Death, purify the blood, and cure fevers that terrified entire cities. Apothecaries locked it away in iron chests. In London, an ounce sometimes sold for 60 guineas, 25 times the value of pepper. But before the Dutch arrived, the Banda Islands were a crossroads. Bandanese merchants, skilled in negotiation and sea travel, welcomed ships from across Asia and Europe. Arab, Chinese, Javanese, Portuguese, and English traders all anchored in the same harbors, exchanging silks, silver, and ceramics for handfuls of the precious nuts. Contracts were struck in a dozen languages. Prices stayed high because no single power controlled the trade. One Bandanese merchant recalled, "We sell to those who treat us with respect. The sea brings many ships, and we choose our friends." For the Dutch East India Company, this open market was intolerable. The stakes were not just profit, but power, the chance to turn a miracle spice into the lifeblood of an empire. The scramble to control nutmeg would unleash a chain of violence that no one on Banda could have imagined. On March 20th, 1602, the Dutch States General signed a document that rewrote the rules of commerce. The Charter of the Verenigde Oostindische Compagnie, better known as the VOC, granted a private company the powers of a nation. Article 11 authorized the company to wage war in pursuit of profit. Article 12 allowed it to make and break treaties, imprison rivals, mint money, and rule distant lands, all without royal oversight. Behind these clauses stood the Heren 17, a council of merchants, investors, and politicians who would direct fleets and armies from their meeting rooms in Amsterdam. In this new order, commerce was no longer just trade. The VOC could blockade ports, besiege cities, and execute those who stood in its way. Its ships sailed under their own flag, their captains holding the authority of generals and judges. Profits from nutmeg, cloves, and pepper did not just fill company coffers, they funded wars back in Europe, paid dividends to shareholders, and built the fortunes of a republic. Pieterszoon Coen, appointed Governor-General in Batavia, saw himself as the hand of both God and the market. In a letter to the Heren 17, dated October 1620, he urged that total subjugation of the Banda Islands was the only way to guarantee the company's future. To Coen, the Bandanese were not partners, but obstacles. He wrote, "We must bring these islands to order, whatever the cost, or lose everything." The VOC Charter gave him the legal cover to turn this vision into action. In Amsterdam, the board approved his requests for troops, ships, and supplies. In Batavia, Coen drew up orders for an invasion. The machinery of corporate empire was ready to crush anyone who stood between the Netherlands and the world's most precious spice. Dutch warships appeared off Banda Besar in April 1621, their hulls bristling with cannons, their decks crowded with soldiers in steel and leather. The fleet's arrival shattered the morning calm. Orders rang out in Dutch and Malay. Within hours, Dutch East India Company troops stormed the beaches, musket fire echoing through the nutmeg groves. Villages along the coast fell first. Homes built from palm and bamboo went up in flames. Smoke drifted over the sea, thick and choking. The company's ship logs for April 21st list the capture of the island's main stronghold and the arrest of the Orang Kaya, the chiefs who had refused monopoly contracts. The next day, the Dutch staged a public beheading. The head man of Lontor was forced to kneel before a crowd of his own people. The blade fell. The message was clear. Resistance would be answered with death. Soldiers moved from village to village, torching houses and fields. A single entry in the company's execution report details 27 men hanged for rebellion. Women and children fled to the jungle. By May, the fires reached Bandanese. Witnesses described the screams of families as flames swept through the settlement. Some tried to escape by sea, launching small canoes at night. Many drowned or were cut down by musket fire from Dutch patrols. Others starved, trapped between the burning coast and the dense, unfamiliar forest inland. We ran to the hills. The sky was red for days. My father and brothers were gone. Only silence remained. The massacre did not distinguish between fighters and civilians. The old, the young, the sick, none were spared. In the space of weeks, a thriving society was reduced to ash and scattered bones. The Bandanese world that had traded with half the globe was swept aside by the logic of monopoly and the machinery of a company at war. Once the burning stopped, the Banda Islands were nearly empty. Dutch records from 1621 show only about 1,000 survivors left from a population that had once filled every village and harbour. The VOC, now in full control, faced a problem of its own making. Nutmeg trees still grew, but there were almost no hands left to harvest them. Company officials began a new kind of operation, one measured not in gunpowder but in human cargo. Ship manifests from Batavia in 1622 list the first transports. 200 Bandanese rounded up and deported, chained below deck for the journey north. In Batavia, these survivors were registered as indebted laborers, a legal fiction that erased their freedom but kept them on the company's books. The plantations that replaced the old villages needed workers. VOC ledgers from 1622 to 1630 track a steady flow of replacements. Javanese, Moluccan, and Chinese laborers bought and shipped in batches of dozens or hundreds at a time. By 1630, the total number of imported slaves reached 1,500. Each arrival was logged with a number, a place of origin, and a price. The company calculated the cost of each laborer against the projected yield of nutmeg, an equation that left little room for the lives behind the numbers. The new workforce cleared fields, planted saplings, and tended the groves under armed supervision. Mortality was high. When a worker died, the records simply noted a replacement order. The invisible labor that kept the nutmeg flowing to Amsterdam was bought, sold, and replaced as needed. The Banda Islands, once a crossroads of traders and languages, became a company plantation. Its fields were silent, its workers nameless, its profits shipped off to distant shareholders. In Amsterdam, the bronze statue of Pieterszoon Coen stood for 135 years, a monument to what the Netherlands once called its golden age. Funded in 1885 by business leaders and city officials, the statue's base praised Coen as a nation builder. Schoolbooks echoed the same story, describing him as the man who brought Dutch order to distant islands. For generations, the violence in Banda was cast as necessary or simply ignored. But the past does not stay silent. In 2020, Amsterdam's City Council debated the statue's future. Council transcripts recorded heated words, some argued for history, others for justice. Activists, including descendants of the Banda diaspora, demanded its removal. They read aloud the names of lost villages and quoted the company's own records. 90% of a people gone for spice. By a narrow vote, the city agreed to take the statue down. The decision did not erase the past, but it forced a reckoning with who gets remembered and why. In the summer of 1667, Dutch and English diplomats gathered to end a war that had stretched across oceans. On the table lay a deal that would redraw the map of the world. The Dutch agreed to hand over Manhattan, a muddy, half-built outpost on the edge of the Atlantic. In return, they demanded Run, a tiny speck in the Banda Sea, lost to English raiders but home to nutmeg trees worth more than gold. The Treaty of Breda Article 3 spelled it out, Manhattan for Run. Dutch merchant ledgers valued a single hectare of Run's nutmeg at £3,000 to £5,000 a year, more than all the beaver pelts or timber New Amsterdam could ever yield. In that moment, a spice island outweighed the future of New York. The hunger for nutmeg had become so absolute that an empire traded away the heart of a continent for the promise of a few more fragrant harvests. Greed turned a handful of islands into a killing ground. It left statues where graves should stand. Today, corporations still shape memory and profit from violence. Who we honor is not just a mirror of the past, it is a choice about the future. Should these monuments remain? Let us know below.